Hello everyone and welcome to the Index of Avalon. In this series I will be focusing on one aspect of the game, Tainted, Grail, the Fall of Avalon, thoroughly explaining the basic rules, the nitty-gritty, and the rare circumstances. Chapter 1 locations and the exploration journal for Location 101 will be used in this demonstration, and possibly minor story spoilers in regards to information in Location 101. With that said, today we will be discussing the act of exploration and the exploration journal. Every location card in the game possesses stories, lore, and adventures. At the cost of 1 energy, we can explore these locations further. You can also explore in a party of multiple players, with the cost of energy being equal to the number of players. Example, if 2 characters wanted to explore a location together, the total cost would be 2 energy. Note, though, that the cost can be split up in any way you want. 1 character can pay 2 energy, or they could split the cost 1 and 1. To explore a location, you could do one of 2 things, but both will result with the same outcome. You can either A, take the location card your character is exploring and flip it over and read the back. Or B, you can turn to the exploration journal and look for the section that has the same corresponding number as the location you are exploring. For example, here in location 101 corresponds to the location card 101. Now, let's push this aside just for a moment. If we flip a location over to explore it, we'll be presented with a story based around this location. We will then be given a couple options that have certain requirements. For example, it states here, if you have secret card 66, go to verse 4. We would check to see if we possess the secret card 66. If we do, we go to verse 4. If we don't, we continue reading on to the next option. Of note, if any member of your party possesses that secret card, you choose this option. If you have the Hunter's Mark status, go to verse 6. The way you check to see if you possess this status is you would grab your save sheet that you're using for this campaign, flip it to the back, and apologies. You flip it to the back and look to see if the Hunter's Mark box has been checked. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. Hunter's Mark, and see if it is checked. If it is, we would go to verse 6. If it is not, we continue reading. It is important to note that you must read the exploration section from top down. You can't skip an option in this section. So in this particular section, when you're going over options that have very specific requirements, you have to start from the top and go down. So let's say, basically you would if you have the Winds of Weirdness status, then you would do this option and not even worry about these 2. Same with this. Let's say if you had secret card 66 and the Hunter's Mark, you would have to go from top down and make the choice that comes first. In that example, the secret card 66 going to verse 4 would occur before this happened. Okay? So, of note, you will always turn to the exploration journal in the end, meaning it is most efficient to not flip the card over, but to just go straight to the exploration journal when exploring a location. The only positive thing I see from flipping over to the other location is to see the beautiful artwork on the back of the card in a more full view, and it is 100% worth it if you can. The only time that I personally don't flip the card over is if I have a multitude of different items on top of it, menhirs, things like that, then it's not really worth shoving them all off just to look at the back of the card. Now, warning, we are going to be looking through Location 101's exploration section in this book. Apologies for any spoilers, but I feel that this is the best way to teach you how this book works. Okay? To locate Location 101 very quickly, or any of the other locations, use these little orange tabs on the side. If we flip over here, it's pretty easy if you just flip through. If you want to find Location 139, boom, it's right there. Okay? Now, if we, let me flip this around real quick. So, this top section right here, from this section up, this was included on the back of our location card. So this is all old stuff, but down here, this is all of the new stuff. And we're going to be reading through a couple of these options and proceed to read some of the less kind of spoilery verses. So, in terms of the options, so we can either visit the families of the champions from the first expedition, we can ask the townsfolk to help you prepare, we can rest for the day in your own home, or we can wander the alley twisted by the weirdness. Note, though, it also states that you can do this only if the Men Here model is not in this location. When reading the exploration journal, it is very important that you read carefully so as to not choose an option you weren't meant to choose because you didn't fulfill the requirements. Also note that if you're traveling in a party, you cannot split up and choose different options, so you can't send Maggot off to ask the townsfolk to help you prepare and have your rest for the day in your home on the same exploration. Okay? To further help you understand things, we're going to choose a few of these options and just to see how it all turns out, okay? So, why don't we start with visiting the families of the champions from the first expedition? So let's see, so that tells us to go to verse 1. Verse 1 is located here. So, basically the families are mourning as the first explorers have been gone for a while, and we are faced with two choices. We can either loosen their tongues with mead, or we can ask them to share their burdens. Let's take a look at the first option. So it says, loosen their tongues with mead. There is an old custom, a late night wake for those who wandered far from their home. Holding it for everyone who left with the expedition won't be cheap, though. Pay one wealth or one food, and go to verse 2. Let's see. Important to note, if you cannot pay the one wealth or the one food, you cannot choose this option. If so, we will move to the next choice, asking them to share their burdens, which requires your character or a member of the party to have at least one empathy attribute. If you do not possess this as well, then you choose the leave option and return back to the start of the page and choose a new option, meaning you would go back up here and choose one of these options instead. Now notice that these two options we have here in verse 1, they actually will lead to the same verse. They both lead to verse 2. Now this means that different types of characters can eventually reach the same conclusion, since there are many different options, there are different approaches to be able to get the same thing. Now, let's move to verse 2 as if we fulfilled the requirement for this verse, which is down here. So basically you learn more about the heroes who were sent before you. It then states, gain part 1 of the fate of the expedition status. Exploration ends. To gain a status, you will take your save sheet for the campaign, flip to the status section. You will then find fate of the expedition. And it says to gain part 1 of the status, so we would put a check mark here on the 1. It will always tell you which part of the status to gain. If you re-explored this area and made the same choice to get to verse 2, like we just did, you wouldn't then gain part 2 of the status or any other part. So if you explore it multiple times, you wouldn't get part 1, then part 2, part 3, and then part 4, and so on and so forth. You would just gain part 1 because it specifically tells you to gain part 1. Good thing to note, the statuses on the back of the save sheet also affect everyone who's playing the game. So for example, let's say if Maggot here was the one responsible for gaining, let's say, general directions, it doesn't just apply to him, it applies to everyone who's playing the game at that time. Okay, so with our exploration ending, as it states here, exploration is ending. Let's go back to another choice we can make. Let's see, why don't we rest for the day? Rest for the day now. So we will go to, let's see, verse 5, and it states, many would refuse to call this place a home, but the familiar setting brings you some much-needed serenity as you lay to rest in your bed. You can't help but wonder whether it is the last night you will ever spend under this roof. If there's an active men here in this location, each party member gains 2 health and loses 2 terror. This is a great thing to explore early in the game if you encounter something strong and you're low on health. Okay. Now, important to note here, the end of each verse will either tell you to go to a different verse or it will say exploration ends. So, for example, there's nothing stating here that the exploration is ending and it doesn't redirect us. So, just a trip up I personally had, you do need to make sure you turn the page and always look for either exploration ends or turn to verse X. So to continue, if there's no men here in this location, each party member gains 1 health and 1 terror. You pass for the rest of the day. Exploration ends. Now, of note, if a choice leads you to passing for the turn, what that means is your day ends, and you would then proceed to the end of the day steps. I personally house rule this interaction. If a choice you made while exploring leads you to ending your turn earlier than you would like, I allow people to take that choice back as long as it doesn't have a huge effect on the story. Okay? Excuse me, sorry. Let's see. You will also use the exploration journal if your character has a dream or nightmare, and it will be in this grayer box in the chapter section. So if your location contains this symbol, and you end your day here, for example, here, you will trigger a dream. You will then turn to the corresponding section in the exploration journal that matches your location number and read that dream. If you possess a you are dying or you are going insane card, you will actually read the nightmare instead. If there are multiple people on the same location, they all experience the same dream. They will experience either a dream or a nightmare depending on if they have the you are going insane card. But for example, let's say these two are just fine, they're in great health, they will both experience the same dream and the results will affect both of them. So that is the basics of how you explore a location and how to use the exploration journal. Let's dive into a couple of other rules when doing this action. So you can explore the same location multiple times as long as you have energy to do so. If you notice, location 101 had a multitude of options for us. So if you truly wanted to spend the day going through all of those options, you can, as long as you have the energy to spend. Of note, though, it's best not to be a completionist and spending all your time exploring every single location. Your men here is counting down every single turn, and if you get caught up in the story too much and exploring too much, eventually the men here will go out and you will not have completed any of the main quest. So just keep your eyes on that. So you also cannot abandon one of your explorations kind of midway. Like let's say you're making your choices, you're going from verse 1 to verse 5 and then verse 5 to verse 7, but then you're like, ooh, I don't really like what's happening here, I'm just going to bow out. You cannot do that. You have to, the only way that you can end an exploration is if it says exploration ends, or if there is a leave option, as there was in our verse 1, there is a leave option to end the exploration early. Okay. So there are some random elements in the exploration journal. For example, a verse may ask you to roll a 6-sided die and add a certain attribute or other modifiers. So let's say a verse asked me to roll a 6-sided die and add my aggression to it. I would then roll the die. I got a 4. Then add my aggression, which let's say if I was playing, if I was playing Eiley here, she actually doesn't have any aggression, so the result would stay at 4. Note that while exploring as a party, you will use the highest attribute among characters that are exploring with you. So, for example, let's say I had Bior here, who has 2 aggression. Instead of using her 0 aggression, we would use Bior's 2 aggression, bumping this up to a 6. Also note that you do not add characters' aggression together. Let's see, I think Maggot actually has 1 aggression. So if Maggot, with his 1 aggression, and we had a Bior here, who has 2 aggression, we would not add 3 to the dice roll. We would add the highest number, which is 2. You may also come across a verse that states, if you are X character, go to verse X. This helps with the replayability of the game since only certain events are available to certain characters. Of note, if you're exploring in a party and that specific character is in the party, all of you can go with this option. So if it says, hey, if you're Maggot, you get to go to verse 4. And you have Eiley here in the party with you. It's just fine. You can both go to verse 4 and resolve whatever it tells you to resolve. Okay. Another thing you're going to run into when you're doing your exploration journal is this image. So this is a secret that needs to be decoded. To decode, take 3 of your dials and line up the skulls exactly with your dials. It will then reveal a number to you based on what number is here at the bottom of the dials. So here, I'm going to demonstrate this real quick. So make sure you flip to the skull side, and you need to make sure that when you line these up, they match the picture just as so. This one's just straight up and down, which is nice and easy. And this one is completely upside down. You will then look at what 3 numbers appear here. For this example, it is 2, 1, 5, 215. Okay, so you will then proceed to the back of the book and look for this blue Book of Secrets, BOS tab, meaning Book of Secrets. You will then look for your verse number that you just revealed through those dials and read what it says and resolve what it tells you to resolve. So, a big aspect of the exploration journal is loot. At the end of a verse, you will often see it say something along the lines of gain 1 wealth and 1 item. Each party member receives 1 XP. This means that everyone gains 1 experience point, but you collectively only gain 1 wealth and 1 item. If you're playing alone, you get to keep all of it. But if you're playing with multiple people, you need to divvy it up. You need to divvy out the wealth and the 1 item to the people who need it or could benefit it from the most. There's also a difference between paying for something and losing something. For example, we read a verse that stated that we needed to pay. For example, let's say we read a verse that stated that we needed to pay 1 energy to go to the next verse, and my character has 0 energy. I couldn't continue to the next verse. If it stated that I needed to lose 1 energy, and my character is at 0, nothing occurs and you can continue reading. So, just for an example that we saw over here, when we were trying to loosen their tongues with mead for the villagers to learn more about the previous adventuring group, it actually says pay 1 wealth or pay 1 food. So we could not go to verse 2. We couldn't choose this option and go to verse 2 if we don't pay the 1 wealth or the 1 food. Okay. Let's see. So if while you're exploring, it tells you to resolve an encounter of a specific color, like a green encounter, a blue, or a gray encounter, draw an encounter card, resolve it, and continue reading. Sometimes it will ask for a specific encounter card. You will have to search your encounter deck for that specific card and resolve it. There is a chance that the specific card is not in your current encounter deck, as it may be maybe a more difficult encounter later in the game, but you will have to dig through kind of your extra encounter cards and to find it and resolve it. Throughout the exploration journal, there is also a handful of unique one-time encounters. These will look like regular encounter cards, but there isn't a card to represent the encounter, just an image in the book. So let me find just a quick example of that real fast. And this shouldn't be really any spoilery. Okay, that one's pretty. Well, actually, hold on, that's a specific name. See if I can find something real quick here. Let's see. Okay, like this. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so for example, right here, you can turn to a page and you could see an image looking something like this. So this is an encounter card. There just isn't a specific individual card to represent it. You'll resolve it like any regular encounter. Okay. So let's see. We're just going to turn up to this image real quick. There you go. With that said, thank you everyone for joining me on another episode of the Index of Avalon. I hope this video helped you understand everything you need to know about exploring location. Happy adventuring, and I hope you have a great day. If you have any questions about exploring, or if you have a weird or strange situation that came up that involves exploring, please leave it down in the YouTube comments, and I will reply to you promptly. Thank you guys. Have a good day. Bye.